This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit. Wizards, witches, and bouncing scarecrows, oh my. It's Howl's Moving Castle, and this film is lit. Hello and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. On this week's episode, we're talking about Howl's Moving Castle. Katie, had you seen this movie before?
I had not.
I had not either. We're going to talk about it and compare it to Diane Wynne Jones's Howl's Moving Castle from the 1986, I believe is the year?
Yeah, 86.
There you go. Film came out in 2004. We're going to compare and contrast them. I think we have every single one of our normal segments.
Yes.
So let's get right into it with Let Me Sum Up.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
Okay, so I'm going to do a book summary.
Okay.
A slight disclaimer. There are a lot of plot threads in this book.
Yeah.
I've just summarized kind of the main one.
Okay.
So I'm leaving out some of like the side stuff. And I'm also leaving out the twist at the end.
Okay.
We'll discuss it later, but for now I'm just giving like a straightforward summary.
Fantastic.
Sophie works in her family's hat shop, secluded from the world until one day the Witch of the Waste comes in and curses Sophie, making her look like an old woman. Feeling that she can't stay at home, Sophie sets out to seek her fortune and ends up in the castle of the dangerous wizard Howl. Sophie meets Michael, Howl's apprentice, and Calcifer, the fire demon who powers Howl's moving castle. She also discovers that Howl, although vain and prone to dramatics, isn't so bad either. Along with a cast of other colorful characters, Sophie, Howl, Michael, and Calcifer work together to find the missing Prince Justin and Wizard Suleiman, and ultimately defeat the Witch of the Waste forever.
All right. For the movie, real quick, I'm going to try to sum this up as succinctly as possible. A lot happens, and in the end, it gets a little wild. Sophie is a young hat maker. She's the oldest of her family. She's got to take care of the family business. She makes hats. One day, she meets Howl. She doesn't realize it's Howl at the time. He's a powerful wizard. She gets chased by shadow monsters with him. He flies her away and saves her. And then she encounters the evil Witch of the Wastes, who turns her into an old woman. So she runs away into the countryside. I'm not sure exactly what her plan is at that point. Maybe just to try to find help or something, because she knows witches and wizards are out there. She ends up running into Howl again, but Howl doesn't realize it's her at first, or he does, but it's not important. She ends up in his moving castle, where she becomes a sort of a caretaker of the castle for a while. She meets the other band of characters, including the young boy Markle, who works with Howl, and Calcifer, who's a fire monster who hangs out with Howl and powers the castle. Also, she runs into a scarecrow with a turnip for a head that's animated, that moves on its own. Long story short, they kind of do, move around. She cleans up. Some hijinks ensue. Eventually, the Howl is called to join the as a wizard, he has to join in the war that's ongoing currently in this realm that they exist in, but he's called to join basically both sides of the war, I think is what it sounds like from my memory in the movie, because he goes by a lot of different sort of names, and so like he works for both sides of the war basically, or they both want him or something. So he sends Sophie to the high witch Suleiman or something, and says, tell him you're my mom and that I won't come help them. But then this doesn't work out. She sees through it, and then Howl shows up anyways to her, and then a fight kind of breaks out, and they run away. Sophie and Howl get away, but now Silverman is chasing them. But then also the war is still going on. This is where it gets a little touch and go for me because there's a lot of details, and it seems the narrative kind of bounces around in a way that I found a little tough to follow. Not bounces around, it's hard to explain. But then Howl has to go fight. So he's going to help save people from the war that's going on. He's like trying to stop the bombs and stuff. And meanwhile, Sophie is trying to figure out what to do back at the castle. She's at the castle and then decides she needs to try to help or something. This is where I get very confused at what was supposed to be going on here. I don't remember exactly what. They're in the castle, and then
the town is being bombed.
How does she have the vision? That's after this part. That's after this part. She pulls the heart out of the castle to go help Howl. She says Howl needs our help, so they're going to leave. They take the heart to go help Howl.
Right.
But then he says this will make the castle collapse. It does. So then they go back in the castle with the heart, and then it rebuilds, and then they're going to help Howl in the castle in a smaller version of the castle.
Yeah.
And then I needed to watch this twice. I did not understand what was going on in the end of this movie.
You had like the same trouble with this that you had with Spirited Away, I feel like.
Well, but this I wasn't even looking for what was like the point so much as like what is even like what are they doing? Like what's the goal here? Like what is I don't know. And I think so, and maybe it's a difference in storytelling. And I really like we can just talk about it right now because I overall really enjoyed this movie. It's a beautiful film, looks really cool, lots of like really neat like sort of singular tableaus and that sort of thing. Really fun story, fun characters, and the narrative for most of it made sense, but then it felt, and maybe this is a difference in storytelling styles between cultures or something, like maybe it's cultural storytelling like norms that I'm not used to. I don't know.
I think it could be a little bit of that. I think there also could be like maybe a translation factor.
Maybe translation's part of it, but there was moments towards the end of the third act of this film that I felt like the narrative sort of lost its thread and things were just happening without much rhyme or reason, and then it just kind of wraps up.
Yeah,
and now maybe I'm wrong.
Hard to follow.
Yeah, and I didn't feel that way through much of the beginning. I mean, it kind of meanders for the first two acts at times, but it was enjoyable, and I was along for like I was. Then in the end, I was just like, wait, what is happening now? Maybe I need to again. Maybe like Spirited Away. Maybe I need to watch it again, and maybe I'm trying too hard. But it feels like there should be more of like a narrative through line that I'm following that makes sense because it is sort of a movie for kids that shouldn't be that. Or maybe the fact that it is a movie for kids means it's okay that like the narrative through line doesn't like follow in a way that like you know what I mean, that I'm kind of needing from a movie when I'm watching. Anyways, I enjoyed it. I just found at the end of the third act a little like bit of a jumbled mess. But so then they go to help him, but then the castle falls apart because Calcifer goes out.
She separates Calcifer from Howl's heart.
That's it. And then the castle falls apart. And then she goes through the doorway into Howl's past. And then sees that Howl ate this falling star when he was a kid. And then his heart came out of his chest and turned into Calcifer. Which we've kind of been a thread throughout the whole thing, that his heart is what like Calcifer's made of, basically. And then so she says, I know how to help Howl, and she recombines Calcifer, the heart, into Howl, right?
Yes.
And then Calcifer comes alive still separately without it's a little, again, I was a little like lost at exactly what all was transpiring at the end of the film. But and then then the war ends because reasons.
Yeah.
And they live happily ever after.
Yes.
Yeah. That was not a great summation. I'm sure people are screaming who love this movie. Like, I just I will fully admit that I probably need a second viewing to like nail down. Maybe I just missed some like little details in the third act that made everything sort of tie together. But I was having a tough time. Didn't help that our movie skipped at one point, but we went and watched the part that we missed. We went back and watched it, so I felt like I saw everything. But anyways, that's the summary, I guess. Let's move on and play Guess Who?
Yeah. The triumphant return of Guess Who.
The triumphant return of Guess Who.
Who are you?
No one of consequence.
I must know.
Get used to disappointment.
Okay.
So we have 4 here. I think you'll get all of these.
Okay.
The staid gray dress did not suit her, particularly when her eyes were red-rimmed with sewing, and since her hair was a reddish straw color, neither did caterpillar green or pink.
I would assume that is Sophie.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's young Sophie.
She is wearing a green dress, right?
Gray.
Like a greenish gray dress in the movie. It's not gray. I thought it was like a greenish gray
Yeah,
dress.
it's like a greenish bluish grayish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the book, she's wearing a gray dress.
Okay.
He was such a dashing specimen, too, with a bony, sophisticated face, really quite old, well into his 20s, and elaborate blonde hair.
I would assume that would be Howl.
That is Howl.
Yep.
The elaborate blonde hair kind of gives it away.
And the bony, sophisticated face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Her eyes went to the lady's wide hat first. Real ostrich plume dyed to reflect the pinks and greens and blues winking in the diamonds, and yet still look black. This was a wealthy hat. The lady's face was carefully beautiful. The chestnut brown hair made her seem young.
Based on the hat and the diamonds and the ostrich plume, I would assume that is the Witch of the Wastes.
That is the Witch of the Waste.
There you go.
It would be a thin blue face, very long and thin, with a thin blue nose, curly green hair, and savage purple teeth.
This one I'm having trouble with. A thin blue face, very long and thin, with a thin blue nose, curly green hair, and savage purple teeth. Oh, I guess the only thing I could see would be maybe that's Calcifer. Is that Calcifer?
That is Calcifer.
Okay.
I did a little bit of trickery. I took out references to flames.
Okay.
It's like the curly green flames
Yeah.
are his hair.
That makes more sense. It also helps that I saw, not your cover, I saw a cover of this book somewhere, and I'm pretty sure Calcifer's on the cover, and he looks like that, but he can tell in the cover that it's flames. Is it your cover? Or
Yeah, he is on the cover of
That's
my
not the one I was
copy.
thinking of, but there's one that
yeah.
I saw that looks very similar to that description matched, and it was like clearly fire, so I figured that's what it was. Because in the movie, Calcifer is just sort of like a normal looking fire with eyes and a mouth.
There is one point in the movie, the first time they move the house or the castle, where he like goes Super Saiyan, he looks a little bit more like this description.
Yeah, I noticed that too because
instead of like a cute little flame.
Yep, instead of a cute little flame hanging out on a log.
Cute little log.
Yep. Cool. That was pretty straightforward, like you said. I think probably anybody who watched the movie would have gotten all 4 of those. So
I had a bunch of stuff marked. You noted the other day while I was finishing up the book.
Lots of notes.
I had a bunch of, I put little tabs in the book whenever I come upon a character description, especially if I've never seen the movie.
Yeah, and you don't know.
Yeah, and I don't know if that character is going to make it in or not. So I probably had like 9 or 10 tabs.
Wow.
In my book, and as you can see, 4.
So only 4 of the characters made it into the movie. Huh. Interesting. All right. Let's move on and ask the question we ask every other week. Was that in the book?
Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone.
What?
Honestly, don't you two read?
All right. This is a very general question. Listeners probably already know the answer to this from, or at least a little bit from our Let Me Sum Up segment. Is any of this story the same? We talked about this in the prequel that, from what I had heard and read, that a lot was changed. How much of this story from the book made it into the movie?
That's kind of a rough question.
Yeah.
They follow like a similar-ish plot outline, there are some scenes that are like very similar. But ultimately, I would say that these two stories are not really all that. Like, I don't know, they're the same, but they're not really. I'm a little sad that we didn't find this fun fact for the prequel, but while I was going back and looking things up, I read that one reviewer described watching the film as being similar to reading high-quality fan fiction.
Okay.
So it's kind of like we took some stuff and we made our own, like, alternate universe version of this story.
Okay, that makes sense, and that's kind of what I figured, but we'll get to some of the specifics here over the course of the episode of what they changed and what they didn't, but yeah, that's kind of what it had sounded like to me. In the movie, towards the very beginning, when Sophie first meets Howl, he picks her up and they just fly away to get away from the shadow monsters. They just levitate up in the air and then they walk through the air. It's fun. It's a fun little scene. Can Howl in the book just fly?
There is a scene where Howl and the Witch of the Waste have a magic battle over the ocean, but he doesn't fly like he does in the movie.
Okay. So how do they have the battle? Or is that for later?
I mean, they're like having a magic battle.
But how are they over the ocean?
I mean, like, there's not a scene like in the movie where he like bounces up into the air and like.
But he can fly.
I guess.
Well, that was my question. And if they're having a battle over the ocean, then they're flying, are they not?
I said he doesn't fly like he does in the movie.
Okay, well, you have to expand on that but he does fly. I feel like that's an important distinction. There's a difference between not exactly the same way it happens in the movie, that's not how I read it in the book, versus but he does fly. Because when you say they have a magic battle over the ocean, I didn't know if you meant they were flying or they were on a ship or, I just wasn't sure what that meant. Okay. So in the movie, during this time when they're running away, when they do have to fly, it's because they're running away from some weird, shadowy, globby creatures. Are those in the book? And what's their deal?
They are not in the book. So I was kind of wondering about them as well. I would interpret them as something similar to like a golem, maybe. Or just like shadows. I don't know. I couldn't tell if they were supposed to be like shadows or if they were... Because initially they looked like tar monsters.
But they come like through the walls, which made them feel more like shadowy creatures to me. And it... I think we later realized
there are like different shadow creatures.
Yeah. There's several different ones, but I feel like we find out that they're essentially like they work for the Witch of the Waste, it seems.
Yeah.
Because she has them like carrying her little...
Yeah.
Whatever that's called, like that kings and queens get carted around in.
Mm-hmm.
She's in one of those, and there's like two shadow creatures that carry that. They seem to be like this similar type of thing, and so they're working for her, and I guess she's sending them after Howl in this moment.
Yeah.
Because she wants his heart, I guess.
Probably in the movie.
Yeah, in the movie. Cool. Does Sophie get turned, speaking of the Witch of the Waste, does Sophie get turned into an old lady by a very large witch? Because in the movie, the Witch of the Waste shows up at her hat shop and is like, you're tacky, and then turns her into an old lady.
Yeah.
Is that what happens in the book?
She does get turned into an old lady by the Witch of the Waste, who the book does not imply to be very large. Okay. But
that was an interesting, it's a Miyazaki thing. Those very of like stylized aesthetic choices for characters are kind of what's the word of it? Trademark of Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli films, and like even like so like the super large like overly huge characters we see in several of them. The couple we've seen, there's always like a character kind of like that at some point, and even somebody like Howl, who is like abnormally like tall and
like
thin and angular
and I correct me if I'm wrong because I haven't watched a ton of anime, but I think that's also like an anime thing.
Yeah, it is. I have also not watched a ton of anime, which is also one of the things I was thinking earlier when I was during Let Me Sum Up, when I was talking about how like sort of the storytelling style of Miyazaki films, something about them is lost on me. And I think part of that may also be that I never got into anime. The anime has never been a thing that I just, for whatever reason, I just as a kid never really watched it. And so I'm not steeped in like in sort of the anime storytelling, because it is a distinct style of storytelling. Yeah. And I also wonder if maybe that's where I'm missing a little bit of, because whenever I watch a Miyazaki film, I'm like, this is like the only one so far. We've seen 3. We watched Kiki's Delivery Service, Spirited Away, and Howl's Moving Castle now. And I loved Kiki's Delivery Service, and I felt, from my memory, I've seen them all once. I didn't have that feeling of like losing the thread of what the point is here and what's going on, and the narrative kind of like.
And it is a kind of a simpler story.
I think maybe that's what it is that I still felt like it had the style that I really like. Now, these maybe are even more stylistic than like Kiki's Delivery Service, but the style's still there, and sort of the whimsy and the magical realism of the whole story and everything that's really fun and that I enjoy. And then again, the art style and stuff, without like this sort of like, I don't know. Yeah. Both of these now have, and again, I think I liked this more than Spirited Away, because Spirited Away was a whole thing. I not only didn't get it, I didn't get what I was supposed to get from it. This one, I at least think I got what I was supposed to get from it. I just didn't get it. Like the story. Towards the end. The both first 2 acts, I was fine. I was there. Does Sophie make friends with an animated, and I mean, everything in the movie is animated, but an animate scarecrow?
There is a scarecrow in the book who appears to be alive in some way. However, Sophie is scared of him for a good portion of the book. This is actually this is a good place to talk about the scarecrow, because I was kind of torn on which one of my segments to put this in. So in the book, the scarecrow is described in like a pretty creepy kind of way. Like he's not like a cute, fun hopping scarecrow. He's like, his turn up face is kind of like starting to rot and collapse, and he's like wearing raggedy clothes, almost like out of a horror movie. Yeah. Now he does ultimately end up being good, but the way that he's perceived by the other characters makes it hard for him to get help from them and do what he needs to do, which is partly the point, I think. Yeah. Now, in the movie, he's like a cute, helpful character, which I totally get. It lightens the tone. Character design is awfully cute. Yeah. But I find the book version maybe a little bit more intriguing. Yeah. But I don't necessarily mind the change.
Yeah. I thought the movie one it's a fun little character. Like you said, he's very cute. He shows up and I like that he always like gets her shawl for her, or like whenever she drops a piece of clothing, he shows up with it like to bring it back to her. It's cute, and he's very kind of dog like almost in its portrayal. But
he's kind of a mascot-ish character.
Yeah, and so I thought he was really fun in the movie. I enjoyed the character. So it is definitely an interesting change. But I think that you're probably not wrong that the book version. Maybe has something more to say about it, because the ultimate, if it goes the same place where that turns out to be, I don't think I have a question about it, so we can just ask. Does that turn out to be the prince or whatever that?
Sort of, yes, but no, which I'll get to later.
Okay, because I could see that, because in the movie it is a cursed prince who basically was turned into a scarecrow. The idea of him being more unseemly, or like
he's more like grotesque
and terrifying, and like you said, that causing a difficulty with anybody being willing to help him, and thus he's kind of stuck and cursed or whatever. There's something to that, which I feel like maybe they didn't need to double dip on that, because I think that's a little bit what they were going for to some extent with Sophie, with her curse, since she's like an old lady, because I think a lot of in the movie, a very big sort of thematic element is aging and how we treat people that are aging and that sort of thing, because we have the Witch of the Waste character later in the movie that seems like a very she sort of turns into like almost like she represents after she kind of becomes good kind of in the later part of the movie.
Yeah, she gets like her powers stripped from her.
She gets her power stripped, and she becomes almost like a senile old woman,
Yeah.
and it feels a little bit, and they're like taking care of her, and it seems like, and then also with Sophie's character, it seems like there's some commentary going on there about how to about respecting people as they age and not taking older people for granted and that sort of thing, which is an interesting, there's some good thematic meat there. I think it's I don't remember where I started this but anyways, I got to a different topic from where I started, which was about the scarecrow. So all right, in the movie, I like the design a lot. It's really cool. Howl's Moving Castle is this giant, like, mishmatched, like, cobbled together building of just, like, little houses and things hanging off, and there's parts that look like mouths, like, on the front. And, like, it's like this, it's like kind of what you imagine the burrow, but, like, from Harry Potter, the Weasley's burrow, but
moving and
more
steampunk.
Way bigger, more steampunk and like bigger and like more built on outwards, you know what I mean? So it's like room after room hanging on it, and it's a really cool aesthetic, and the way it's animated in the movie is really neat. But I'm guessing from the cover of the book that's not what it looks like in the book.
No, the movie castle has kind of a Mortal Engines kind of a vibe. It's also like a little bit Baba Yaga with like the legs.
I don't know if I know what that is.
The Baba Yaga, the Russian witch, house on hen's legs.
I mean,
No.
I don't.
Okay.
No.
Moving on then.
Yeah.
In the book, it's a typical castle. It's got 4 towers. It floats through the air, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's
so it
also
flies the whole time.
Yes.
Because that's where we get to eventually in the movie at the end. His castle starts flying, but for the first part, it's
the
walking
castle
around.
in the book like floats around. And it's also made out of charcoal bricks, which is perfect for
the talking fire demon in the movies. He's in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we already did because we
already talked about.
we did
Calcifer.
guess too. So Calcifer's in it, but he burns the bricks. Wait, I'm confused.
It's just like a fun thing.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if like he could like. So can he like travel around on the bricks?
No, he has to stay on the hearth.
Well, that's.
I didn't make it up.
I'm just because to me, when you said that, like it's made out of charcoal bricks, one, that seems like not the best like building material, but two, it seems like the whole point you would do that. Maybe they're just charcoal colored.
Maybe, I don't know.
Okay, because I was just saying, like if they were actually somehow made of charcoal, that could be interesting because then he could like travel around the castle. You know what I mean? Like up the walls, and like that would be neat. And I thought maybe that's what it was going to be. But is there a magic traveling door?
Yes. The door works pretty much the same way.
So in the movie, if you've seen it, there's the door that they use to open up. They go to their shop because they sell like potions and stuff to the local people. It's what Howl and Markle do to make money, I guess. Basically, is like sell their wares to the locals. But they do it in multiple places, and they do that through this magic door that they can turn a little knob, and it like basically teleports them to different storefronts, which is cool. It's pretty neat. And it's from the book.
Yeah.
Can Howl turn into a strange feathery bird man? Because that's a big part of the movie, is that Howl turns into this big feathery bird creature.
Well, I'm not going to say that he can't, but he definitely doesn't.
He doesn't. Now, there are 2 sequels to
Yeah.
this, and one of them came out before the movie for sure. So there's a chance that maybe there's some element.
Maybe
We didn't
he
mention-
turns into a strange feathery birdman in a later book.
We didn't mention yet. Normally we do mention if there's stuff that was potentially pulled from the sequel, and that possibly, but it is not in this book. So we're going to say probably not. That's interesting because that's a big part of the movie and kind of a very distinct choice to make.
It is a pretty distinct choice.
It's got interesting sort of thematic elements to do with because how sort of it seems like, this movie's about a lot of things, which is maybe one of the weaknesses to me of the movie, is it's maybe too many themes like going on at the same time. But potentially, like slight weakness.
It's potentially, and I think that is why the end got a little bit messy, because I think there were just too many things to tie together. In the third act. Yeah,
and so because he's like a giant bird, so like because very clearly there's multiple scenes, and we'll talk about one right now, and I want to ask if this was in the movie or in the book. There's a scene where after after Sophie cleans the bathroom and stuff, Howl takes a bath and he ends up accidentally dyeing his hair red with his magic potions. He gets very upset about this because he's a ginger. And now I knew this was in the book because he posted this on social media. And if you aren't following us on social media, do it because you get to see cool stuff like that. But Katie posted that excerpt from the book while you were reading it about Howl freaking out about being a ginger now and how horrible that is. But then after that, and that happens in the movie, but then after that, he becomes very depressed. So much so that he starts like exuding slime and turns into like this big gooey slimy mess, and they have to like drag him up to the bathroom to watch him. This is when I enjoyed the movie the most, was like these kind of moments. And again, this is all like mostly the first two acts. Is that from the book?
Yeah, both of those scenes are from the book.
Okay. So what I was saying earlier with sort of thematic elements is that obviously there's very prominent through lines throughout the course of the movie of Howl dealing with depression, basically. Seemingly some sort of depression type of thing where he can kind of fall into these fits of like despair and it's manifests very physically for him in the terms of like turning into this like gloopy, like gooey mess that just can't even move, and like other people have to like force him to go bathe. Like it feels very intentional and very that like there was some cool, interesting stuff going on there. And then I also feel like that's sort of also reflected with the turning into a bird thing, where he seems to be fighting like there's like this battle between his inner nature in the movie of like, because he can turn into this beast. I don't even know if it's his inner nature, because this is where it gets confusing to me, and I feel like the themes get a little bit muddled, is that at times in the movie, the bird creature that he turns into, Calcifer warns him
he's not going to be able to turn back.
If you keep doing that, you won't be able to turn back. So that's where it feels a little bit like a cautionary tale about, or sort of a caution about like overindulging in power or in some sort of, like your classical fairy tale thing of like, if you use your magic too much, it will consume you. And you have to find that balance in your life between striving for power or using, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not summarizing this perfectly. You have to try to find that balance so that you don't overuse or over, really for anything, that you don't go too far in pursuit of something. In this case, he's using these powers to like help people, but using these powers too much, he'll turn into a bird creature and he'll never be able to turn back.
Yeah.
But then that also the bird creature story later in the movie seems to be more commentary on his inner beast and him being worried that Sophie won't. There's a moment later when he comes home after fighting a battle, and he's in that castle, and Sophie goes and finds him, and it feels very Beauty and the Beast type moment, where he's like curled up in his hole, like hiding as this giant bird creature, and then when she finds him, he like looks at her and like stalks away. And to me, that felt very like he presents this very. When he's a human, he's like super handsome and like very vain and all about how handsome he is. And he's, because he freaks out about his red hair and stuff. And there's this inner creature in him that he hides from people. I don't know. I felt like that I just couldn't quite suss the total. And again, maybe this would all benefit from not maybe. It would definitely benefit from a second viewing. But I felt like their messages kind of morphed throughout the course, and I wasn't quite sure what. And this is again, I guess, the problem I've always had. But I had the same problem I had with Spirited Away, where I felt like maybe the theme that or the message that the movie was going for gets a little lost along the way and then kind of doesn't land in the way that I'm expecting it to.
This was one of the places where like this movie as an adaptation got a little bit odd for me, because the scene where he freaks out about his hair and then he starts oozing green goo, that's like directly from the book.
Yeah.
Like we could call it beat for beat from the book. But it feels not right in the story that the movie is telling. To me, it feels like shoehorned in. Like they were like, oh, we're going to do this for the people who read the book.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it works in the story that the movie is telling.
That scene worked for me. I think I enjoyed it because I thought we were definitely getting a little bit of the hint of Howl's sort of inner torment and why he's sort of the vain, maybe vain's not the right word, but why he presents himself the way he does, because he is very self-conscious and wants to always look a certain way, and when he doesn't, he sort of freaks out. And I think there's, like I said, like an interesting commentary about like sort of depressive episodes and that sort of thing in that moment that I think works. And that you know that the person, or what you see on the surface with somebody like Howl, who seems like this very, when we first meet him, he's this very self-assured, like handsome, like strikingly handsome man who's wearing a cape and like commanding the situation. Versus when something becomes out of his control, he loses it. And I think it works. I think it doesn't maybe follow through with that in a way that is satisfying in the movie. And I think it's partially because there's so many things going on that it was a little tough for any of those through lines to really land. Like any of the like sort of elements of, this sort of, because there's also, then we're constantly dealing with the fact that he's a pacifist and doesn't want to fight, and that has to sort of take front and center towards the third act about like the whole war thing and him not wanting to fight, and that doesn't really seem like a reflection, I guess a little bit maybe of his self. I guess I'm trying to like the thing that I was having trouble with at the end of the movie was sussing out how all of these different thematic like starting like beginnings that they set up in the movie were supposed to come together, and then how the sort of revelation of the third act of him getting his heart back was supposed to like resolve those storylines. So it kind of resolves his inner turmoil about like and sort like him getting his heart back so that he can love and that sort of thing. Because he has this trouble. It seems like he needs to love Sophie as part of the thing that's going to help him. We should have just watched this movie again before we did this. There's so much going on, especially in the third act, that it feels almost impossible to try to break down why it felt like it didn't quite land for me. There's just so many different elements that as soon as I start talking about one element of the story, I'm thinking of a different element. I guess what I'm trying to say is that at the end of the movie, he gets his heart back from Calcifer, even though that hasn't seemed to be a whole issue the whole movie. But it has been, we find out. She finds out that because he gave his heart away, this is what's causing him all these issues. But to me, that moment doesn't really resolve the main storyline with the war and the pacifism thing, because he doesn't then go and fight. He doesn't decide to pick a side. He stays a pacifist because that's Miyazaki's thing. Like he's like no, war sucks and like that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about this more later, but I think part of the issue is that Miyazaki really, really wanted to do an anti-war story.
Okay.
And I don't know that it worked in this particular instance because I think there was too much going on. Yeah. And it got a little bit messy.
Yeah. I really like right now want to this is one of those ones I want to make a commitment to, and I think Spirited Away is also based on a book, so maybe that would help that I would just be seeing it for the second time. I really do want to watch this again and see if it works better for me at the end, because it's especially now that this is the second time this has happened, it makes me feel like there's something wrong with me.
babe. There's
No.
nothing wrong with you.
I don't mean in like any like serious way. I just mean like the fact that it's two Miyazaki movies in a row that like his two of the most renowned Miyazaki films in a row that make me, when I get to the end, go, okay, I get it. I enjoyed it, but like I'm not sure it made sense or was very good. Like, it was good, but I'm not sure it, like, was good. It's so hard to explain. I don't know if anybody else feels the same way I do about these movies, where it's like, they're good, and as I'm watching them moment to moment, I'm blown away by the artistry of the film. And some of the writing, and it's all clever, and again, maybe the translations, there's all kinds of myriad reasons that I could be feeling this way, and I'm not sure what exactly it is, or if it's a combination of all the things, but it's two in a row where I'm just like, yeah, I'm blown away by the artistry of this film as I'm watching it. But then when it ends and over the course of it, and I try to think about what I was supposed to get out of it, I can't help but feel like I wasn't supposed to get, like, not that I wasn't supposed to get stuff out of it, but that it doesn't all, that all of these disparate pieces that all kind of work on their own, when they come together into this final story, like into this final thing that is a movie, it doesn't quite add up and work in a way that I find satisfying. And I don't know why I'm like the only person that feels that way. It's so strange to me. It's so strange. I don't know. It's very interesting. In the movie, they have these, the army or whatever has these strange little, like the wizard, the bad witches, and Suleiman's people, or whoever. There are lots of people have them. There are lots of different flying machines that like the military and stuff use in the movie. But there's these ones in particular in the movie that I thought were very fascinating that are like little tubes that people sit on in a chair, and they have like dragonfly wings. They're cool, but so impractical. Because like one person sits on them and they don't seem to have weapons. They're just, I don't know. I was like, okay, I guess they're wizards so they can shoot spells or something. Like they're witches and wizards, like they can do their own. But what's up with, are those little?
Those are not from the book. Okay. No.
Yeah, and they're just a fanciful little like flying device. Like it's fine. I just thought they were very interesting design choice. Just kind of, I was like, what's going on? What's going on here? It's the same thing I feel about. I can't just keep doing it, but like it's how I feel so often about so many of the design elements and stuff in Miyazaki. I feel like it's supposed to mean something, and then I'm like, nope, maybe it's just a weird thing. Maybe it's just a weird thing, and maybe all of this I'm trying to find some sort of meaning in is just a fun, silly thing. Maybe. I don't know. This is a really interesting element of the movie. Throughout the course of the movie, so Sylvie gets turned into an old lady, but over the course of the movie, at different times in different scenes, as she's doing different things, she appears sometimes younger, sometimes just the same as the old, as she's really old when she first gets turned old. But then throughout the course of the movie, she kind of de-ages at times, but then ages back up. In some scenes, she looks a little bit younger, and sometimes she looks a little bit older. And it's a fascinating choice, and this is one of the other reasons that I'd be really interested to kind of go back and watch again to see and there are some elements of what I saw what was going on. In particular, there's some moments where Sophie really is like standing up for herself and stuff that very self-possessed, where she appears younger. And again, I'm not exactly sure what the message is, but but I thought it was an interesting idea. Does that happen in the book?
That's not explicitly described in the book. No.
Okay, so there's not passages about how
there's no
she's
textual
talking,
evidence for it.
Okay, I thought that was interesting. You noticed that, obviously, right? Yeah, because there are definitely particular scenes where there's one where she's yelling at Howl about something, and she's all of a sudden almost back to her age she was at the beginning, like when she runs outside into the rain at that one point. And is standing in the rain looking out at the lake. She's like slightly young, like she's somewhere in between the old lady and when she was young. And I was like really into that, and I was like, okay, this is cool. It's an interesting thing here. I'm not quite figuring it out. It's the same way I feel about everything in Miyazaki movies. It's like I feel like I'm supposed to figure this out, and I can't, and I don't know what's going on. But it's cool, I guess. But it's cool. Does the movie or does the book? Because we talked about it earlier, but in the movie, they at one point decide they need to go. Sophie's like, "We got to help Howl. Get the fire. Let's get Calcifer and get out of here. We're gonna go to the hat shop, I think, or something. Because he's going to save the hat shop. Howl's trying to save the hat shop, so they're gonna go there to help him. But Calcifer's like, if we leave the castle, it'll collapse because I'm not in it anymore. And she goes, okay. And she goes, well, you'll leave with you first, or you'll leave last. And then they leave, and then it collapses, and then they go back in, and then it builds back together again, but then smaller. And then they use the castle to run.
Well, okay. I think I can help out
Can you help out here? What? This was the part that skipped, to be fair. It was like exactly this moment that we had to go back and watch again.
I think, and don't come at me, movie fans, I think what happens is they initially move Calcifer to separate the castle from the hat shop so that Howl doesn't have to keep defending it. But then once they do that, they're like, oh, now he doesn't know, so we have to go get him. So they want to go back in the castle so that they can, like, get to him.
That's right. At this point, he had put the hat shop in the castle.
Yes.
That's right. Okay, because in my head, because he's not... Okay.
Yeah, and the way that the castle works is a little bit confusing anyway, because it's, like, everywhere and also nowhere.
Yeah.
And also itself.
Oh, so he had put it, but then because he was down. Okay, maybe this is making sense. Because the thing that was confusing me is, or at least this part in particular, because I was very confused by this in the movie, is he was down, like they're watching him down in the city, like he's down fighting over the city trying to protect it, and I'm like, okay, so the hat shop's down there, and I thought they were gonna go down there. But then it was in the thing, but is it in both places because of the magic thing, like the magic door thing?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay. But then they separate it, but he doesn't know it's separated. Mm-hmm. But wouldn't he still have to... if it's separated, then wouldn't it still be down there? And he would still have to defend it down there if he wanted to defend... Nope, I'm done with trying to figure... Okay. I think my problem is that I just want to understand things, and and Miyazaki movies are like, no. Stop.
You big dumb.
Stop. Stop trying to figure things out.
And understand.
And I just can't not understand things. Like, I have to understand what's going on. And I think the thing that's wild to me about them is that I'm usually I think the thing that is most frustrating to me about this and Spirited Away is that I'm usually so, like, I watch and judge movies on how they make me feel, generally, as opposed to, and, like, technically how well done they are, but, like, I'm not, like, into, like, nitpicking plot holes and, like, this and that, and, like, oh, this doesn't make sense, like that. I used to be more like that, like, years ago, but, like, over the last 10 years of my life, that has changed immensely. But then it still feels like there's some difference here, that something about these movies that is doing the same thing to me. This is also not dissimilar from how I felt about the Wes Anderson. What's the animal one?
Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Yeah, Fantastic Mr. Fox. It's a little bit different because that one, the story was like less confusing because there's like less magical stuff going on, but it's not completely dissimilar from that. The themes are more relevant or more prominent and obvious in this one than in Fantastic Mr. Fox, which was my big problem with that. But anyways, okay. I just got to stop trying to understand them, which I can't do, but
yeah,
I can't.
Well, and I think part of where you're struggling with this particular one is understanding the rules of the universe, which I don't know that the movie does like a stellar job of explaining.
Yeah.
Like the moving
that in
castle,
particular.
The moving castle, the door opens up to 4 different places and the windows look out on different places. But and you can also like just go outside of the castle wherever it happens to be at that point. But in order to change one of those locations with the doors or the windows, you have to do a spell and like sever that bond and then reform a new bond.
See, that I guess I didn't. Yeah, that I didn't get. And yeah, I think I just like that because that in particular was something I had issues with. Was that whole, and maybe that was what kicked off my confusion about the whole third act. Is that whole moment where they leave it and then go back in, and then it's like a smaller castle now, and I did not get what they were doing and why. And maybe it's because I didn't understand the rules of that whole thing with separating, and the hat shop was part of it, and that whole part I think I was just a little bit lost on me of like what exactly was going on there. I don't know. But that, yeah, okay. That makes more sense. But yeah, I think maybe the rules just didn't quite click for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so we find out eventually that Calcifer exists. We find out early on that Calcifer and Howl are linked, and that if one dies, the other dies. Mm-hmm. And eventually we find out that is because Calcifer is subsisting on Howl's heart, kind of like that's at the core of Calcifer is like Howl's heart. And eventually we find out that the Witch of the Wastes wants Howl's heart. And I think it was supposed to initially be metaphorically like she was in love with him at one point, but then it turns into like she actually physically wants his heart. Mm-hmm. Is any of that from the book, that whole storyline with one heart being in Calcifer and the Witch of the Wastes wanting it?
This is another kind of complicated question.
Okay.
Calcifer does have Howl's heart. That's how Calcifer stays alive.
Yeah.
There is a character who tries to get part of Howl's body at the end for their own gain, but it's not the Witch of the Waste, and it's not his heart that character is after.
Oh. Okay.
It's that wizard booty.
Oh, all right. Interesting. Because in the movie, the Witch of the Waste does take his heart at the end of the movie and destroys the whole castle.
Yeah.
Even though she's kind of been good again up until this point. And again, this is where things just get confusing to me. She's
been senile.
She's been senile, but then she sees the heart and then she takes it. And I'm not sure what I'm supposed to get out of that about her character.
I don't know.
Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Let's move on. The Wheezy dog. There's a dog in the movies, very cute dog who looks like an ottoman or something. He kind of reminds me of the dog from Beauty and the Beast. Mm. This movie has a lot of elements that remind me of things from other things. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of Wizard of Oz, a little bit. There's a little bit of Beauty and the Beast, a little bit of Doctor Who, which we'll talk about. And there's this Wheezy dog that reminded me of the Ottoman dog from Beauty and the Beast. He's cute, though. Is he from the book?
There is a dog character. It's not the same dog as it is in the film. In the book, the dog ends up being a person who is enchanted to look like a dog.
Okay.
So kind of even more similar to the Ottoman dog from Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, even more similar. And finally, my last question is the moment from the end of the movie where after everything falls apart and she thinks Howl's going to die, I think, and she sees the doorway, though, and she goes through it, and it goes back into Howl's past. She eventually realizes. She doesn't realize it initially. She doesn't know where she's going. She ends up in that little cottage that he's like, this is where I grew up. I think it's what he told her earlier in the movie. Pretty sure. Mm-hmm. And she ends up there and she sees Howl and there's like all these shooting stars. Very beautiful like shooting star moment and stuff. And then she sees Howl across the way on the edge of a lake and he picks up the star and he eats it. And then his heart comes out of his chest and then Calcifer is there. And like this is the moment where his heart kind of separated from him and Calcifer was created. And Sophie sees this and this sparks in her head. She's like, well, I know how to fix Howl, basically. Again, his brokenness is a little
broken.
Well, up in the air in terms of like how broken he is or like what his broken features are other than he gets depressed sometimes and like angry sometimes. But I really did like this movie. I don't want this to sound like, because I enjoyed it as a thing to watch. Like I like had fun. I liked it. It's just when I started when I wanted to understand it, I just had a little bit of trouble trying to understand it. I should just watch it again. I don't know why I said the same thing about Spirited Away. I just need to not talk about him until I see him twice because I think it's just like I can't don't know. Anyways, and she goes, so then she falls through the ground and goes back to current time, and she's able to find Howl and has him put the heart back, and then that saves the day. Is that...
So Howl does share his heart with Calcifer, which we discussed a moment ago. Sophie does not magically pop back into Howl's past and see that happen. There is a contract between Howl and Calcifer in the book, which is that Calcifer uses Howl's heart to stay alive, and Howl then has Calcifer's magic at his disposal, which amplifies his own wizard powers quite a bit.
Oh.
This is also implied to be kind of a common arrangement in this world, where a wizard or a witch will have a fire demon that helps amplify their powers.
That makes perfect sense to me, and I would not have been confused about it. Like, the idea of, like, a witch or wizard being, like, finding some sort of fire demon and, like, merging with it to amplify their power it's like a totally normal fantasy thing like that. And I thought this worked fine, and I just, again, never mind. I'm not even... Okay. So kind of from the book, but different. Yeah, and
different.
Sophie doesn't have him. Does he reunite? Oh, I guess this is the most important part. At the end, does he, like, merge back together?
They're able to separate Calcifer from Howl's heart and give Howl his heart back at the end.
Okay. And this makes him whole. In the book, what does this do for him?
He is able to triumph over the big bad.
Okay.
At the end of the book, because he gets his heart back.
Am I not remembering correctly, or does nothing happen in the movie when this
Pretty
happens?
much
Other than he can now love Sophie because he has his heart?
And then Madame Suleiman is like, I guess the war's over now.
Yeah.
And then it ends.
Because Howl loves Sophie, and that means the war's over. Because what's the point now? Because he has his heart back?
I guess.
Somebody please, I'm not even joking, explain to me the end of this movie. I guess I could go read something. I'll probably read something to explain it. But, like, I would love somebody who's, like, obsessed and, like, or you know, just really likes this movie and has seen it a dozen times or whatever, or even just a few times, and, like, really thinks they get the ending. Please explain to me what... Because, I mean, I heard the lines. I heard what people said, and I know, like... But it just felt... I was like, but what? What? Why? Okay. Still loved it. Still very much enjoyed the film. Anyways, that's it. Let's talk about what was lost in Adaptation, which was a lot, apparently.
Just show me the way to get out of here, and I'll be on my way.
Where is it lost?
Yes, and I want to get unlost as soon as possible.
First things first, I'm the realist. Is this a pure fantasy setting? This is one thing in the movie I was a little bit confused about. At first, didn't really care that much. I'm just kind of wondering. Is this, because when you get a fantasy setting like this, you can never be sure if it's like, oh, is this a pure fantasy world, or is this an alternate timeline Earth with, like, you know, weird flying robots and ships and witches and wizards? Or is this like Middle Earth? Is this a completely different, you know, world?
First, I think that's not an uncommon thing for a Miyazaki film, to have kind of a mishmash-ish universe.
Yeah.
But I'm going to talk more about this later, but I think this is one of the most intriguing things from the book that the movie completely ignores. The book is set mostly in a fantasy land. It's called Inguri.
Okay.
But not entirely. More on that later. The movie does seem to just be a fantasy land, though.
Yeah.
To me.
Because we get names. I don't think we ever hear, like, we hear names of, like, empires and kingdoms that are fighting and stuff. I don't remember what they are, but we hear, like, names of kingdoms and stuff that are fighting, and, like, they don't seem to map to anything, you know, in the real world. But you never know. This could have been, like, this kind of story could have been, this takes place in alternate universe England,
right? Yeah,
in the 1500s, where some weird technological advance and magic happened in the, you know, the turn of the millennium, or at 1000 or whatever. And, like, so I just not that it really matters. Again, I was just kind of wondering. I was just like interested to know what the setting was, because the movie doesn't really kind of tell you. And again, it's not really that important, but I was just wondering. Why did the Witch of the Wastes curse Sophie? She just because she's tacky. She rolls into that hat shop and it's like, you tacky. You basic.
You're tacky and I hate you.
And then she flies through her and turns her into an old lady. And I wasn't sure specifically why. I had some inklings, but I wasn't positive.
Well, in the movie, it seems to be because Howl paid attention to Sophie, and the Witch of the Waste is jealous.
That was what I
got.
That was what I got from the movie as well.
In the book, it's because Sophie also has powers and doesn't realize it yet, and the Witch of the Waste does not like the competition.
Oh, I like that more.
Yeah, so do I.
Why? She doesn't have any powers that we notice.
She doesn't seem to.
She's real good at cleaning.
Yeah.
Which is, woof. Yeah, that was one thing that I will say, and I don't know how much we'll talk about it more, is that I thought the movie didn't do a lot for me in terms of, like, it has some interesting moments, kind of looking at it through a feminist lens, that Sophie's the main character, and she has some really great moments at times, but I didn't feel like it had anything really interesting or empowering to say as a whole. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'm wrong. Again, maybe I just need to watch again and see if it would change for me. But like what I like about the female characters in this movie is that they're complex and well written at times, and they have layers and they're not, as can often be the case in some stories, they're not like just like
She's
one
not
note
Snow
like
White.
Right. They're not like a one note just thing. They have layers. She has fire at times. She's layered, like I said. But overall, it's like when it gets to the end, I was like, well, I don't feel like I got a lot out of. I'm not sure. I just didn't see a lot of like interesting, and maybe that's not the point, and maybe that's not what whoever wrote the movie was going for. Well, I know Miyazaki, but whoever else involved, but it just didn't strike me as particularly like having a lot of interesting things to say about being a woman in this world. Yeah. Am I wrong? I mean,
no. Yeah, I think there are some interesting moments, but because we don't really get anything about, like, what is it typically like to be a woman in this world.
Yeah, and
does the story or the characters attempt to comment on that or subvert it in any way? Not really.
And, like, because there's so much, and I think that's part, I think if I can try to suss down what complicates my enjoyment thematically of this movie and Spirited Away is that maybe I'm too stupid. And I mean, what I mean is that I think, so we start with an interesting idea of this girl who is too mature for her age. And at least I think that's what it's kind of going for, where she's like, they're like, come out with us or whatever at the beginning. She's like, no, I'm going to stay and make hats all night or whatever. And she's like, oh, I don't mind looking after the shop. And it's basically, she doesn't get to live her life as a young woman. She's kind of already, which is why then when she gets turned into an old lady, it sort of reflects her already inner sort of self kind of type of thing. And then she gets to go on this magical adventure as an old lady, and that's interesting. But then so many other curveballs get thrown at that initial interesting setup of a story that by the time we get to the end, I'm not sure. I felt like I've lost the thread of the initial message that the movie was trying to get to me, because I've had bird monsters and so many million different things.
Yeah.
That I feel like I don't know anymore where, and so many wild scenes have happened where interactions don't necessarily match the character motivations from earlier in the movie and what I'm expecting, that by the time I get to the end and she saves Howl's heart, I'm not sure what her journey was. Like, what was the journey and what was thematically, what was I supposed to get out of her journey? She goes on an adventure as an old lady and has fun, and then she falls in love with Howl. But is that different? Like, what was her arc?
Are you asking me to suss that out of the movie or the book?
I'm talking about the movie or in the book. I mean, if you're going to compare or talk about that later, we can do that. I just want to talk about it because this is the stuff that's interesting to me. I just wanted to see if you knew, because in the movie, I'm not sure what like her arc is or what her.
All right. Well, in the book, this is what I got out of it.
Okay.
At the beginning, she is very meek. She doesn't really do much of anything. There's this like idea in their culture, I guess, that if you're the firstborn, you're like doomed to not do anything interesting.
Yeah.
And she like totally buys into that. And she's like, well, I guess I'll just stay here and work in the hat shop because I can't go seek my fortune anyway because I'm the firstborn.
Okay.
And then she gets this curse put on her, and she sets out on her journey, and it's kind of about her like learning that she does have value and that she does have something to offer. And ultimately, she is the only one that can separate Calcifer from Howl's heart and like set everything right because of that power that she has, but she had to like get to that place of realizing that she was capable of that first.
Okay. I guess the movie's going for a similar thing, because as you say that, I'm like trying to like mold that onto the movie, and I can kind of get there. You know what I mean? Like, I can kind of get there. I guess the thing is that when at the end, I don't see it's not her power that she's not the only one that can. She just realizes to put. Mm-hmm. I guess in the movie, it seems to me like she just realizes that Calcifer and Howl should go or that his heart needs to go back in, and they should separate. That Calcifer should separate from the heart, and that the heart should go back into Howl or whatever.
Yeah.
In the movie.
And the movie takes away the idea of her having her own power.
That's what I mean.
Which I don't love.
Yeah.
And I also felt like kind of pinned it on this idea that her and Howl are like one true loves, which I don't love.
Yeah. And I guess that was the thing, is that it just felt like all of her, I guess to me, it felt like in the movie, especially in the third act, her actions were no longer being motivated, or she was no longer in sort of control of what was going on. She was just kind of bouncing around. She wants to help Howl at one point. And that's not true.
Let's move on to the next question.
I know.
I know.
All right, my last question for Lost in Adaptation is, why does, and is her name Solomon?
I think they say it's Solomon.
Solomon. Yeah. Why does he decide to just let the war end after Howl finds his true love? Because in the movie, he finds his true love, and there's an insert shot of her being like, he's found his love.
Foiled again,
war over. What's the point? I'm like, what?
This is not in the book. I thought that was a really weak ending. Sorry, movie fans. I cannot help you understand it because I don't understand it. That character isn't even in the book.
Okay.
She's an amalgamation of at least two book characters. Mrs. Penstemon, who is a powerful witch, and wizard, Suleiman, who is the king's wizard, who's missing for most of the book. They don't know where he is.
Interesting.
He went to confront the Witch of the Waste and went missing.
Yeah.
Like you do.
Yeah.
And then maybe in the movie, she's also a little bit like the king, I guess. I mean, there is a king, but she also is like functionally
seems
king.
To be, yeah. He just like,
yeah,
he shows up for one scene and
it's like, woohoo, war machines.
Yeah, the movie implies that like she's like really pulling the strings, and he's just sort of like a figurehead.
Which I don't get, because like, why bother setting up this whole thing where she's like a warmonger puppeteer if that's ultimately not going to go anywhere or mean anything, and you're not going to do anything with it? I don't get it.
That was what was confusing to me, and then because she pulls Howl there because yeah. And it's just, I wasn't sure what Howl finding love now and finding his heart. I guess it's that she knows now he'll never come to her. Like, he'll never.
Maybe.
But then what does that have to do with the war? I guess is my confusion. Like, the war still could go on. It's because he's not going to fight. He's a pacifist. Like, he's not going to fight. He's just going to go live with her and be happy. So I wasn't.
Maybe, like, the implication is that, like, maybe now he's powerful enough to stop it.
Well, that's what I thought maybe was the thing. But then we should have seen.
Yeah.
Should have done that. I
agree.
Like. Because otherwise, I
mean, maybe they were just like, we're getting close to that runtime.
Maybe.
Boys.
Yeah.
we're getting there.
Because that would have been another thing, if then I'm not going to rewrite Miyazaki. Because it feels so presumptuous. Anyways. All right. That was all I had for Lost in Adaptation. Let's go ahead and talk about what you thought was better in the book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
Okay. Better in the book. We already talked a little bit about this, but the reason that the witch curses Sophie is because she's jealous of her magic powers and not because Howl had a little bit of a flirtation with her. So Sophie has a power where she kind of brings things to life in a way.
Interesting.
So she talks to hats as she's making them, and then they do incredible things for the people who wear those hats. Like crazy magical things happen to them. She talks life into this walking stick that she has. And also it's implied that she does that for the scarecrow as well. Because when she initially comes upon him, he seems to be like just a scarecrow.
Yeah.
She also at a couple points makes clothes for Howl and unintentionally talks intentions into them that gives him extra powers.
Huh. That's interesting.
And then, like we said, I don't think movie Sophie is meant to have any kind of powers.
No, I don't think so.
I did not get that from the movie.
At least not any explicit like magical powers. I think I could see the argument. I'm sure somebody would make the argument that her powers are meant to be more traditional, empathetic, traditionally
soft
female.
skills.
Soft skills of like empathy and that sort of thing, which I think there's nothing wrong and can be empowering in its own way to tell a story about a heroine or a hero or whoever who uses those sort of skills in a way that saves the day or whatever. Like it doesn't always need to be like the sort of coded, not necessarily masculine, but like.
But I don't think that the way the book does it is coded masculine either.
I didn't even mean masculine. And I guess what you're saying is true. That because like that sort of magic from the book is more of a magical manifestation of like traditional feminine like kind of thing.
But she actually does get powers. It's not like, oh, I'm going to be kind.
Yeah.
And kindness is my superpower.
Yeah. I think that can be done, and I think the movie does it okay, maybe. I don't know. It is a little, that's where it lost me a little in terms of like her journey and like what I was supposed to get out of her journey. I think that would have been the book version. To me sounds more interesting to me, but I can see an argument. I think you could make an argument for not giving her explicit magical powers. I think you could make that argument. Whether or not the movie does it the right way or not, I think you could make that argument.
So in the book, Sophie basically breaks into the castle. The scarecrow doesn't like go get it for her. She walks right up to it and bangs on the back door until it opens. And then just makes herself at home. There
you go. It's a funny moment in the movie where she's like, find me an inn or whatever, or somewhere to stay or whatever she says to it. And then it comes back with the castle. Again, that's very like dog-like character that the scarecrow is in the movie. But
the movie also leaves out pretty much everything with Sophie's family. We see her one sister, Letty, very briefly at the beginning, and we see her mother very briefly. In the book, she has two sisters, and they have an interesting like plot thread where the mom sends them off to different places and they do a magic spell so they can switch because they would each of them would like rather be doing the other thing. And it's actually Sophie's stepmother in the book, which it's an interesting moment of character growth for Sophie, her relationship with her stepmother, and it's also an interesting flip subversion. Yes, thank you. It's an interesting subversion of like the wicked stepmother trope.
Yeah.
Where Sophie at one point talks to one of her sisters, and her sister's like, you need to leave the hat shop because she's taking advantage of you. You just work and work and work all the time. And Sophie's like, oh, maybe that really is what's happening. Maybe she's taking advantage of me and she doesn't actually care about me. And then later on we meet back with her stepmother again, and it turns out that she's been like worried sick about her the whole time.
That happens
and
in the
she
movie.
feels really bad. Yeah. I don't super love the movie's portrayal of Calcifer. He's cute. The character design is super cute.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about book Calcifer is that you aren't really sure about him for a lot of the book. Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Is he just waiting for his opportunity to do something bad?
Yeah.
And it adds like an interesting layer to the story.
Yeah.
Also, as much as I love Billy Crystal, I felt like the voice casting was a little bit silly.
Here's the thing. With your description of book Calcifer, of not knowing whether he's good or bad, or kind of being unsure about Calcifer in general, that could be another interesting layer. There's already too many layers in this movie probably to begin with, so I don't know if we needed that. But you absolutely lose that when you cast Billy Crystal, because especially because how Billy Crystal plays him, because the movie Calcifer has moments where he like he jokes about like, because they talk about how he won't listen to anybody except Howl, and the character has lines in the movie about that probably could read more mysterious. I feel like, if my memory is correct, that could read more mysterious and more ambivalent if it wasn't Billy Crystal doing it.
Voice.
And it's very clear that it's because Billy Crystal and the way he's doing it, it feels like he's joking almost.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like in the movie, like the way he delivers the lines, he's just, you can tell like he's kind of like a blowhard like type character where he'll talk like he's more. The way it comes across in movies is talking like he's more powerful than he is, but it's obvious to us as viewers, or not more powerful, but that like, oh, you don't want to cross me, but obviously like he doesn't mean it.
Yeah.
Is kind of how I read the character in the movie.
He talks kind of a big game.
Yeah, but he's actually just like fine.
He's a cute little
he's a cute little fire demon. And so like you never have that. So obviously the way they do it in the movie, you could never have that tension. And again, I don't know if that tension was necessary just because so much other things were going on. That would be a whole nother a whole nother layer that just doesn't need to be there. But it could be interesting in the book. I can see where
the movie also changes quite a bit about Howl's character. And I cautiously liked that they went down a more chivalrous road for him and made him more of like an outright hero. But it's also less interesting. Book Howl has a lot of flaws, which means that he gets a lot of character growth that movie Howl does not.
Yeah. Movie Howl has some flaws, and he gets some growth. I can't compare it, obviously. So, but it's definitely, and it's a problem you always have with a movie to a book. It's like they can only do a couple scenes of that, like where he like freaks out about his hair and then falls into a like depressive episode, and and then kind of gets angry about things and like storms off and just leaves and is obstinate and sort of petulant at times. Because there is definitely at times like a Beauty and the Beast dynamic that could have been played up maybe a little bit more, that would have led it's there, but again, I can't compare
in the book
so.
he like doesn't take anything seriously, and he is like, he's kind of a womanizer in that way. Like he's always going out and flirting with the girls. He just like doesn't take anything seriously. He's kind of a coward. Like people will ask him like, oh, you're a powerful wizard, can you do this? And he's like, I don't really want to.
Yeah. So
he has to like overcome that throughout the course of the story.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's the thing is that he does stuff throughout the course of the movie. Like, he doesn't seem like a coward. He says he is at times in the movie. I mean, like, that's his thing. He's like, I'm a coward, but he doesn't seem like it. Mm-mm. He acts a lot over the course of the movie. Like, he goes out as a bird or whatever and, like, does stuff and tries to save cities and stop bombs and all this sort of stuff. So it doesn't seem like he's a coward. And then at the end, he doesn't get any sort of... You would think that the moment where his heart comes back or where he's reunited with his heart or whatever, that would sort of lead to something, but it doesn't in the movie.
They live happily ever after.
They just live happily ever after, which is like, well, I
Big happy family.
I need that moment to lead to something. But
so there's a part in the book, this is kind of a little thing, just like a scene that I enjoyed, where Sophie uses a spell to make one of his robes bigger. Because she sews him a thing and it's too small, and she's like, well, do we have anything that'll make this bigger? So they use like a magic powder on it, but then it just keeps growing and growing, and he keeps like wearing it out of stubbornness because she messed it up. And that's like, there's like a scene where he's like in a room and the entire room is just like full of his robes and he just like keeps going about his day.
Yeah, that would have been fun. That would have been a fun scene in the movie.
Also, Howl is from Wales. The fantasy world in this story exists as a parallel universe to our world. He's from here.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So he's like, he went through a magic door
portal.
or something.
Yeah.
Huh.
One of the most intriguing things about the book, I think, and it's not expanded on a ton. I'm guessing there's probably more about it in the sequels.
Yeah.
But it is something that the movie just like completely drops.
Yeah. Not at all.
The space with all the flowers, where they go near the end.
Oh, the field?
Yeah, the field with all the flowers.
Yeah.
That's in the book, technically, but it sounds like a lot more fantastical. Like in the movie, it pretty much just looked like a field of regular flowers.
Yeah.
And in the book, they're described as these like giant, fantastical, like crazy flowers.
Yeah.
All right, so the ending. The ending of the movie is a little messy. I'm not sure that all of the plot threads tied together quite as nicely as maybe you would want them to.
At least me would want them to.
Yeah.
If nobody else.
And then even that aside, there is, I think, arguably the bigger issue of the whole war plot thread just being like, curses foiled again.
Yeah.
The war's over now.
Yeah.
So I think it works a lot better in the book.
Okay.
And so in the book, the ultimate big bad turns out not to be the Witch of the Waste, but her fire demon, who has been in disguise for most of the story and has kind of like taken over and is now like puppeteering the Witch of the Waste in a way. So this fire demon has kidnapped two characters, and they've been missing this whole time. In the book, which is Prince Justin, who is the prince that we see at the end. The
scarecrow,
I guess,
think,
yeah. And Wizard Suleiman. And the king has been trying to get Howl to look for these two for like the whole book, and Howl is a coward, so he doesn't want to do it because he doesn't want to face the Witch of the Waste.
Yeah.
On and on. So anyway, what this fire demon has done is combined different parts of these two into one body and then mishmatched the other parts and sent them out as curses. So the scarecrow and the dog are both like mixed up parts of these two characters who are under a curse. And then with the parts that she likes, she's trying to create the perfect human. Okay. And she wants Howl's head to complete her wretched creation.
When you say she, you're talking about the fire demon. Okay, just making sure we're not confusing the Witch of the Waste.
Yes, I'm talking about the fire demon. Yeah. So near the end, she takes hold of Calcifer to try and accomplish this, to try to get Howl. And Sophie has to use her own magic to break that contract between Howl and Calcifer and separate Calcifer from Howl's heart. And then once he has his heart back, Howl is able to defeat that other fire demon and win.
Interesting.
And everything like is turned back to rights.
Gotcha. That feels like it makes more sense. I definitely think I could see your point about trying to feel like when he decided that we wanted this pacifist message and that war is bad and dumb, which no disagreement. I'm just like, at least in general broad theory, no disagreement, that he needed to like figure out a way to shoehorn this story then into having the war play a more prominent role.
Yeah.
So it became like a jigsaw puzzle almost to like...
Well, and I think there are already brief mentions of war in the book.
Yeah.
Is the thing that's crazy to me. Like, at a couple points, like, the king mentions, like, oh, this other country is probably going to start a war with us when we need my brother, the prince, back because he's, like, a brilliant military general.
Yeah.
And whatever. And I just think, like, you could have just, like, beefed that up.
Yeah, had some commentary on it.
And made, like, you could have even, like, abandoned the whole thing about, like, the Witch of the Waste / her fire demon trying to create, like, an amalgamation person and just had that character be a warmonger.
Yeah.
Trying to create war between these two countries.
Yeah.
So she kidnaps these characters and makes it look like the other country did it. Like, you could have done that.
Yeah.
And I feel like that would have been a really easy way to work war into this already existing story. So I'm not really sure about some of the decisions that were made.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really feels like, especially you could have found a way to then have Howl getting his heart or whatever, that ending that we kind of get in the movie, then having some ramifications on that greater story other than just characters then deciding that story doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
It's like the weird thing, like, it was interesting. Yeah, I think guys, you heard it here first. We're rewriting Howl's Moving Castle. All right, let's talk about what you liked better in the movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
I'm not sure that the changes to Howl's character, like, totally play out with his character development, but I did like that at the beginning it's Howl that stops the soldiers from accosting Sophie, because in the book he accosts her himself.
Nice.
It's not as creepy as it is in the movie.
Yeah.
Like, in the movie there's the one soldier's like, well, maybe she's prettier when she's scared, and I was like, what?
Yep. Yeah.
But it is him who, like, tries to flirt with her in the street. So I thought that was a nice change. Mm-hmm. I do like that Scarecrow gives Sophie his cane. Mm-hmm. I thought that was cute. That was a cute moment. I like that the movie shows her de-aging and, like, fading in and out of the curse. And, like, I feel like the implication is maybe that she almost, like, is able to break it herself. Yeah. But, like, can't quite get there. Yeah. It's one of the benefits of a visual medium is that you're able to do stuff like that without it being
much more subtle.
Yeah, much more subtle without it being... Because if you did that in the book, it would be totally obvious to the reader, I think, what was going on.
I think you could do it in a way in the book that felt not... I mean, it would be obvious, but it wouldn't be super, like, on the nose. You could write it kind of... You would write it like the scene from, like, Lord of the Rings, Fellowship? Yeah, with, like, Galadriel. Mm-hmm. Obviously not to that extent, but we're, like... You just, like, very vaguely describe slight changes in her appearance as she's doing an action or saying things that are... You know what I mean? Like...
But I would almost worry that it wouldn't be as effective because I think you'd have to do it less than the movie does, because I think it would get tedious
if you did it every other scene. Yeah, you're 100% right that you couldn't do it, like, some scenes she just couldn't appear. Yeah, you know. And again,
and I think eventually the reader would be like, okay, can we just tell the story? Yeah. Come on, man.
100% agree. Yeah, because then the movie can get away with, you know, so one scene for just a moment she can, or, you know, for the whole scene she can just be like 20 years younger than she was when she's the old lady.
Yeah.
And you can just see it. You don't have to. She's standing up a little bit straighter. She doesn't.
Yeah.
But you don't have to if you had to do that every other scene and describe, if you wanted to do it even 4 or 5 times over the course of the book, it would get okay. Yeah. So that is something that the movie benefits from just being able to do.
I thought showing Howl and Calcifer meeting and forming that bond was interesting.
Yeah.
We had some other issues with it, but I thought it was an interesting choice to show that. I liked that Sophie had to give Calcifer part of herself to help him move the house.
I thought that was cool. When she cuts her hair off.
It's very fairy tale.
Yeah.
It's very witchy, where you have to give a part of yourself in order to make that magic work.
And it's a very obvious visual signifier change in her character. Mm-hmm. At that moment where she has decided to help Howl and that she does care for Howl and she wants to go save him by moving the house or whatever.
Yeah.
Because then she goes from this braided sort of young girl with the braid to she has a sexy...
She's got a choppy bob.
Choppy bob cut. She looks the whole end of this movie. I was like, if they ever make a live action version of this, Kiernan Shipka needs to play her. Because in the end of this movie, she just looks like Kiernan Shipka to me from Sabrina, basically. Yeah. All right, that's it for Better in the Movie. Let's talk about the few things the movie nailed.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
All the boys want Sophie's sister, Letty, in that brief scene where she goes to see her and she's working at the bakery and all the men in the shop are shouting her name. She looks really interesting.
Distinct.
Yeah, very distinct. But that is from the book. She works in a bakery. All the boys want to make her acquaintance. Very popular. How readily Sophie embraces being an old woman who doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah, she's just
she's all right, I guess this is what we're doing now.
Yeah, I see that again. That was when the movie was working most for me. Like I said, the first 2 acts is when the movie was really working. The second act gets a little meandery at times, but the first 2 acts I was on board, and I just wish, I could have stuck the landing a little better for me.
Yeah, and I thought it was kind of refreshing in the book too, because I think so often when you do a dramatic or traumatic transformation like that,
it's gotta be a big thing.
It's gotta be a big thing and the character has to freak out.
Yeah.
But that wasn't how the story played it, which I thought was interesting.
And it's interesting because I thought I enjoyed that about the movie too, that it just gets on with it.
Yeah.
I was oh gosh, I really hope we don't spend 10-15 minutes with her hiding in her room from her mom and then going to talk to somebody in the city or in the town about what do I do, and trying to explain who she is, and they're what, you're crazy old lady, expecting all these scenes of her trying to talk to her friend or something and be no, it's me, and they're
no. The movie even has more of that than the book does. The movie shows her staying overnight and then talking to her mom in the morning and saying she's sick. In the book, she just immediately pieces out.
Yeah. Yeah, but I really enjoyed that we didn't get all of that, what I was expecting with that sort of typical thing when that happens.
Yeah.
That was nice.
The castle being a mess and also full of spiders. That is straight from the text.
So many spiders.
Horrifying. But Sophie doesn't care. She's a badass old woman. The door that opens up to different places, depending on the color of the knob. We talked about that. Sophie accidentally dyeing Howl's hair. What looks more orange in the movie. It's a reddish, pinkish color in the book.
Yeah.
And then the green ooze.
Yeah.
They do the chalk markings around the castle.
Was cool.
And then they scoop Calcifer up very carefully so that he can move the house. And then later on they move the castle into the old hat shop, and they have the valley with all of the flowers out the other door. All things that the movie nailed.
Cool. All right, we got a few odds and ends, and then we'll get to Katie's final verdict.
All of Miyazaki's old women look exactly the same. I'm just going to say it. They all look exactly the same.
Miyazaki's Young Women also. Like,
That's fair.
It's a distinct style. A lot of the characters look very similar because it's a minimalistic kind of style.
Fair, yeah.
Or maximalistic at times, but like the young girls and stuff are just young characters in general are like very minimal in terms of like their features and stuff, and then it goes the extreme opposite for like older characters where they're like 8 million wrinkles and lines and like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sort of this
and giant noses.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like these sort of caricatures of, well, I guess they're caricatures of young people and caricatures of old people to some extent, which is, you know, again, it's a very interesting visual style that is fascinating to look at. So I mentioned it earlier, but like I could not get over in this movie, and I'm sure it's very similar, obviously, from what it sounds like in the book, how much this reminded me of Doctor Who. Mm-hmm. So much. With Howl as the Doctor, and now this was written by a British lady, right?
Yes.
In the 80s, so Doctor had been around for 20 years at this point, 25 years or whatever. Not saying it's inspired by or anything, but like it to me it felt very similar. You have a flying castle that's like
I'm sure this fan fiction exists.
Seemingly bigger on the inside with this sort of angsty, emotional, brilliant, basically magician who flies this castle around and then meets up with
companions.
Who has companions, like a young kid who like works with them, and then he meets up with this young girl who's suffering from something that he has to, that, you know, I was like, this is just Doctor Who. Like, this is just an episode of Doctor Who. And that was the thing that I think is a little funny, is that with Doctor Who episodes, a lot of times the third act of a Doctor Who episode, things will just kind of get solved. Mm-hmm. But for me, and not necessarily always in a way that like quote unquote makes sense, but for some reason, like I at least can understand what happened at the end. Whereas this, I don't know, not to go on again, but it was striking to me how very similar it felt to Doctor Who. Also, he regenerates the inside, not regenerates, but he does the makeover on the inside of his castle in the movie, which the inside of the TARDIS regenerates all the time, like constantly in the show. I was like, dude, so many things. It was wild to me how many different elements were very similar to me from Doctor Who.
The character of Markle is a lot younger in the movie than he is in the book. He's like a young man. His name is also Michael in the book. I don't have strong feelings about these changes, so I have them under my general notes.
Yeah.
He's also in a relationship with one of Sophie's sisters.
Huh.
But since they basically aren't in it, I guess it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all that Markle in the movie is played by Josh Hutcherson.
Yeah, I saw that.
I was like, oh.
Of a young Josh Hutcherson.
Of lots of things, but probably most notably the Hunger Games series, which we'll do eventually.
Yes, we will.
I've read all those. Boy, do I not like that third one. We'll get to that. That was one of the most like nosedivey book series I've ever read in my like recent memory. Like I was like, first book, cool. Second book, okay. Third book, oh boy.
I've actually never read those, so I guess whenever we get to them, we can do them as a Switch series.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll have to be a summer series probably. Maybe. Yeah.
But not this year's
summer series. Not this year's summer series. What's up? What? Stay tuned. We already know what it is. It's exciting. I think the movie could have used more time, and we kind of talked about this, so we won't go into it a lot, but I think more time in the beginning to sort of set up Sophie's character flaws, and thus it would give her a stronger arc and a more concrete arc that I at least I found more satisfying when we get to the end. And to know what her quote unquote flaws are at the beginning, it's like kind of alluded to, like, but to me they didn't come across as flaws. She's like, just working at this hat shop.
Yeah, I'm just real quiet and industrious.
I'm quiet and I work at this hat shop, and like we get one scene where they're like, come out with us, and she's like, no, I'm gonna work a little bit, but it doesn't play off to me as like a bad thing in that moment.
Well, I mean, yeah, that by itself isn't a bad thing.
I know.
Like, it's not a bad thing to be introverted and prefer to stay in.
Yeah, I guess that, and it didn't seem to be negatively affecting her happiness. Yeah. I guess that's what it was. To me, it didn't seem like it was negatively affecting her in any way for them to be like flaws. Yeah. She didn't seem like longing to, you know what I mean? Or like depressed or miserable or anything. So it was just like, she just seemed totally content.
Where the book did it a little differently was that she's kind of bought into this idea about what her life is going to be or is supposed to be because of the oldest child thing.
Yeah.
And it's clear that she's not particularly happy, but she's like really resigned to it.
Yeah.
And I don't think that comes through.
Because she has a line in the movie about, well, I'm the oldest child, so I take care of that stuff. But she doesn't seem upset about it to me.
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't seem, and it doesn't even seem like resigned. And maybe it's just the anime. Maybe it's like the style or the performances. Maybe with the voice. Maybe in the original Japanese, maybe that performance comes across in a way where they feel more resigned, and that didn't translate. Who knows? I have no idea. Although if we'd watched the original dub, I wouldn't know because I wouldn't be able to hear that. I don't think in them. But maybe.
So this is the last thing in my notes that I want to talk about, and that is anime man booty.
There is some anime.
There is
one
booty.
shot.
There's booty in this film.
Yep. Christian Bale's booty.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, technically.
That towel comes off, and then there's booty.
Yep. My last note was we mentioned in the prequel that the Batman growl made an appearance.
Yeah.
Because Christian Bale does the English voice of Howl, and there was the Batman growl, and we saw when it was, and it's when he turns into the giant bird creature.
Yeah, he's like full-on bird monster.
Full bird monster.
And she follows him into the West Wing.
Yeah. That's the very Beauty and the Beast moment. And he looks at her. He's like, "Burger."
Yeah. No, it was kind of laughing because when we were doing the research, it was like, oh, supposedly he does the Batman growl,
like,
and then
no,
it was really obvious.
absolutely.
He absolutely does the Batman growl.
Yeah, it is 100% what it is. Spot on. All right, let's go ahead and get to it. The final verdict.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first, verdict afterwards.
All right, so I kind of think that no matter what I say here, a bunch of people are going to be upset.
Yep.
So I'm just gonna say it. The book is better. I'm gonna rephrase slightly. The book is really good. The movie is also really good. But is the movie a good adaptation? I'm not sure. The big thing that bothers me is that it seems like Miyazaki was maybe too focused on working in the anti-war message, and I think it may have been to the detriment of the story. And that baffles me a little bit because I think that he could have easily either one, beefed up the mentions of war that are already in the book and kept the story much closer to the original text like we talked about.
Yeah.
Or B, just told his own freaking story without making it an adaptation of the existing story, because let's be real, this is a tricked out Beauty and the Beast retelling, and the movie plays to that element way more than the book does.
Yeah.
So he could have just told his own story.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know what was really going on here. Because in the end, we didn't get either of those things. We got something in the middle that, in my opinion, turned out kind of squishy. And maybe the movie stands on its own just fine. I'll never know that because I read the book first. And as a one-to-one comparison, the book just takes it. It's more complex. It's more layered. Those layers work better together than the layers in the movie do, and it has more complex and layered characters as well. And honestly, part of me is kind of upset that this book has already been adapted into a movie that now totally overshadows it.
Yeah.
Because I would love to see it done differently.
Yeah.
Like, I would love to see it adapted, like, maybe as a live-action TV limited series. I guess I can still hold out hope for that.
It's possible, but you're all right in that the movie overshadows it. Like, everybody knows about the movie. It's one thing with, like, Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, where the books are, like, these huge beacons of, where they'll probably also get another adaptation later. I don't know if this
if this ever will, but I would love to see it adapted by someone who wants all of the plot threads and who allows the weirder, darker elements in the story to just be what they are. But c'est la vie, I guess.
All right, and as somebody who hasn't read the book, it mostly works until you get to the third act, is my opinion. And then it just kind of, again, I'll watch it again, but just kind of turns into a bit of a mess in the third act. But that's my take. All right, as always, you can do us a huge favor. Go to patreon.com/thisfilmislit. Support us there for $2, $5, or $15, or however much you want, and get access to bonus episodes of the show, early access for certain levels, or you get your name read on our prequel episodes, you get priority recommendations, all kinds of fun stuff. You can also do us another big favor if you can't support us, which is fine, is go to iTunes or wherever you do, mainly iTunes. I think that's the only, because Stitcher's, something's wrong with Stitcher. Don't know how to fix it. Sorry about that. If you listen to us on Stitcher, check out iTunes or Spotify or one of the other places. It's still updating. I don't know what happened to Stitcher. I tried to fix it. Couldn't fix it. Maybe one day. But go to those places and leave us a review. That helps out a lot. You can also find us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads, all those places. You can just search This Film Is Lit. Find us, follow us, and that way you can be involved in the fan polls and all the posts that Katie does and all that good fun stuff. And bit of an unfortunate announcement. We're going to have to take 2 weeks off. We're moving again. And we are not going to be able to do an episode for a couple weeks.
We have to pack up the whole studio.
We have to pack up the entire studio along with the rest of our stuff.
Yeah.
And it's very short notice. We're doing this over the next week and a half. And it's going to be hectic and nonsense. And Katie trying to read a book in there in the middle of that, and us trying to record an episode is just probably not feasible. So we're going to remove a slight bit of stress from our lives and not do that. But we will come back in 3 weeks' time with a prequel episode and then a main episode. And that should be a fun one. It will most likely be a listener request from one of our Hall of Fame or Academy Award winning patrons. Yes. So you can look forward to that. It is, I will say this, it's a movie that came out last year?
Last year. The tail end of last year.
Yeah. Towards the very end of last year. It got middling reviews. I wanted to see it, but we never did.
Yeah. Well, then it got middling reviews and we were
and then we definitely didn't see it, but they were like, we should do it sometime for the podcast.
Yeah.
Because it is based on a book. We won't say for sure what it is, just in case we don't, for some reason, aren't able to do it, but that's the plan. So in a couple weeks' time, you can look forward to that.
Yeah. And in the meantime, you can check on us on social media. Mm-hmm. I'll still be posting stuff. It just won't be specifically related to an episode. And then we will announce what that next one in 2 weeks' time is going to be. And while we're on the topic of social media, I want to give a shout out to Shelby Suderman on Twitter. Mm-hmm. Shelby, big fan of Howl's Moving Castle.
Yeah.
Of the book. They read it every year. And we were talking about it on Twitter, and they were able to really help me kind of organize my thoughts on this, because I was like, man, I don't know how I'm going to talk about this one. Yeah. So that's another fun thing that if you follow us on social media, you can chit chat with us about the books and the movies that we do.
Yeah.
And especially if you're a big fan of something, we would love to talk to you about it.
Get your input. It's fantastic. Awesome. So until next time, whenever that may be, probably 3 weeks, guys, gals, non-binary, and everybody else,
keep reading books,
keep watching movies,
and keep being awesome.